We're watching how Britain starved Ireland, okay? Throwing a fucking bone to
This is a story about Ireland, and it's a story about an event that you've probably
throwing a
heard
fucking bone.
might not.
Throwing a goddamn bone to the Irish, alright? It's time.
Know
It's
much
time for the
about.
fucking Irish
It's
to get a
usually
goddamn
called
bone.
The Irish potato famine.
For fucking once,
In
for
most
fuck's
histories,
sake.
the Irish potato famine doesn't get a lot of attention. At most, it appears as a pretty simple story to explain Irish migration abroad. In the beginning, Irish people depended on the potato for food. Then there was a potato disease. Many Irish died, and others migrated abroad on what they called coffin ships to England, Scotland, Australia, and North America. But the story of the famine is a lot more complicated and a lot more disturbing than that. It was much less natural. And
Bro, this is the most Irish looking dude I've ever seen. I know he's like, I mean, he might not even be Irish, but he just looks so incredibly Irish.
much more artificial than you might think. And it all goes back to a man named Thomas Malthus. Malthus was a British economist, and in 1798, Malthus put forward an influential idea and a rather counterintuitive one. Malthus said that when food production increased, people were better off for a little. But that improvement led to an increase in population, which eventually caused societal problems. There were too many people and not enough food to go around. Poverty and famine were the natural results. Like animals, Malthus said, humans had a certain carrying capacity.
Literally Thanos. Just Thanos. This is like where the Thanos snap comes from. Straight up. It's also incorrect.
When it exceeded that carrying capacity, enough people would die to return the population to a natural equilibrium. So in the 19th century, that so-called Malthusian model became the conventional wisdom in European intellectuals. It led them to focus on what they called overpopulation and made them think of famine as nature reducing population to a sustainable level. No serious economist today will tell you that having too many people is the reason people are poor or hungry. In 1981, the economist Amartya
I don't know, man. There's a lot of eco-fascists, brother. I don't know. I don't know what you mean by that, with the whole no serious economist would say that. Eco-fascism is growing, okay?
Sen explained the real cause of most historical famines. If you look at the historical record, Sen said, a collective lack of food is never the real problem.
The irony, of course, is that like a lot of eco-fascists literally will... A lot of eco-fascists unironically act as though the third world is responsible for, robbing the earth of its natural resources, its finite natural resources, when their consumption is incredibly marginal. No matter how large their fucking population could be, their consumption is literally marginal in comparison to the average American. Sorry, we're a bunch of fat fucks, and we eat a lot, and we consume a lot, okay? That's just the unfortunate reality, whether you want to admit it or not. We in the Western world, okay, we are not the productive forces on this planet, and we just consume. We are just a consumption engine, okay? And ridiculous to assume that, like, we need to do population control in Africa when, we are the ones who are fucking consuming shit nonstop. Why make it about being fat? That's what you got out of this? God damn, dude. Fat activists are just like, holy fuck.
The cause of famines, while it often has something to do with a decline in...
Are you turning eco-fascist? No, I'm making fun of the eco-fascists. First and foremost, this overconsumption or we don't have enough resources to take care of everybody is bullshit regardless. Okay? But it's ridiculous to turn around and think that it's literally the fault of African nations.
Agricultural production is more related to the unequal distribution of food. There's enough food for everyone, but some people can't exchange what they have for that food. Sen found that famine is usually not the result of too little food, but of exploitation and unequal economic relations. Irish people were the other against whom the British could define themselves. They were viewed as lazy, barbaric, barely human. Ireland itself was run as a colony for the emerging class of British capitalists. While England was rapidly becoming the wealthiest country in the world, Ireland was kept incredibly poor. The population was almost entirely composed of peasants. The large majority of all houses were huts made of mud. And the land those peasants lived on was owned almost entirely by absentee English landlords who never visited Ireland and extracted exorbitant amounts in rent. Even the British government regarded these landlords with disdain, calling them, quote, the most oppressive species of tyrant that has ever lent assistance to the destruction of a country. So most Irish people were on a treadmill of extreme poverty. They were the most destitute people in all of Europe. In many districts, one government report found, their only food is the...
For the record, this is part of the reason why the Irish have a radical streak, and of course, on top of that, have been pretty solid defenders of Palestinian rights and liberation for a long time.
Potato, their only beverage, water, a bed or blanket is a rare luxury. And that part about the potato is especially important. Ireland has a lot of fertile soil and a topography that is ideal for grazing cattle. But when the British came in and colonized Ireland, they systematically took that land and used it to produce beef for the domestic English market. And so the economically poor Irish turned to the potato, a versatile crop that could be grown in large numbers on bad soil. And while the potato was adaptable, it was also really unreliable. There had been widespread potato failures pretty much every other year in the 19th century. And in the
Then why are a lot of Irish Americans so right-wing? Because they're fucking hogs, dude. They're not Irish anymore. They are centuries removed from colonial oppression. And also part of it is because they literally, in an effort to fit with America, decided to overcompensate when they originally were not felt or were not considered to be white as the rest of the whites. Overcompensated by being police forces everywhere. Okay. Straight up. We're just like, oh yeah, well, maybe if we just become the boot for the Capitol, we'll be accepted. And it was true. It was a good bargain. It did work.
1840s, a new potato disease, originally from North America, arrived in Europe. Huge potato crop failures sprung up in northern France, in Belgium, and in the Netherlands. But none of those places were as dependent on the potato as a source of food as was Ireland. So when the disease got to Ireland in the 1840s, the results were devastating. In 1845, about a third of the Irish crop was destroyed. By 1846, 75% of it was gone. Hunger spread rapidly with unprecedented severity. This period became known in Ireland as An Drachil, the bad life. But as Amartya Sen observed, this wasn't just about a pure lack of food. In fact, during the entire period of the famine, Ireland was continuing to export food out of the country. Enough cows, sheep, pigs, and grain were being shipped out of Ireland that could feed the Irish population twice over. But the British government refused to do anything about it. Soon, the Irish began begging their British overlords for relief. And early on, the Conservative Party government, then the representatives of the old British aristocracy, had a fairly sympathetic response. They bought food from America and brought it to Ireland, distributing it to the poor. But in 1846, a different party, the Whigs, came to power in Britain. And the Whigs did not have the sort of aristocratic paternalism that the Conservatives had. They were advocates of a philosophy called laissez-faire, the idea that the free market, left alone, would solve virtually any problem.
Yeah.
So the person they put in charge of
Famously.
famine relief in Ireland was a man named Charles Trevelyan. Trevelyan had been a colonial administrator in India, and he was a big believer in those Malthusian ideas about population. He didn't really want to stop the starvation. He thought it was, well, necessary. The famine, Trevelyan said, was, quote, an effective mechanism for reducing surplus population. He said it was the judgment of God that sent the famine to teach the Irish a lesson.
For the record, the reason why most people don't know about this or think about it on terms similar to, like, I don't know, genocidal dictatorships of the past 100 years is because the people perpetrating such genocide and man-made famine are not considered historical oppressors or took an L in the Cold War or took an L, luckily, in World War II. So that's the reason why, like, it's okay when, you know, the good guys do it. Straight up.
The real evil, he said, is not the physical evil of the famine, but the moral evil of the selfish, perverse, and turbulent character of the Irish people. So Trevelyan's solution to the famine was to let it ride. The laissez-faire Whigs decided to change nothing. They refused to stop the movement of food to England and limited the amount of food they offered to the starving Irish people. The food that was being imported into Ireland was largely used not to feed the Irish, but to feed the cattle being slaughtered for British consumption. Even when they did offer some relief to the Irish peasants, they instituted moralistic tests, requiring that recipients live as indentured servants in a workhouse to improve their work ethic. The British even required that food only go to people who owned almost no land, forcing impoverished farmers to sell all the remaining land they had to their landlords, many of whom lived in Britain. And so, the famine only got worse. Diseases of hunger like typhus, dysentery, and cholera spread wildly, killing just as many people as the lack of food. Social structures broke down. Ordinary people turned en masse to begging, crime, prostitution. In Western Ireland, some resorted to cannibalism. The British, fearing a rebellion, sent army troops instead of food. As the news of the famine spread all over the world, shiploads of food finally began arriving. Americans from all strata generously sent money and food over the Atlantic, only to have their donations met with huge British cargo fees upon arrival. Even the Choctaw people...
Bro, Jesus Christ. Okay. Yeah, that's just business, baby. Oh, are you guys doing humanitarian aid from the other side of the fucking pond? It's sick. We're gonna, we're gonna make money off that.
People donated to the famine relief funds, just a few years after they had experienced starvation themselves on the Trail of Tears. It was a beautiful example of...
Yo, clip that and put it as a video. Why is it so funny to take the piss out of Irish, potatoes, or even slavery we were subjected to, and so out of line to say it about black slavery or any type of genocidal regime? Because chattel slavery is like this. It's really fucked up to compare oppression, but chattel slavery and the genocidal colonialism that black people are subjected to in Africa is worse than this. Okay, that's why. And also, Irish people are still of a paler complexion, as you know, and therefore were finally added on to the pool of white people. Not only that, but also, once again, remember, and this is something that Irish people also, understand, recognize, mention, is that indentured servitude is different than chattel slavery. It's still fucked up. It's still, horrifying, morally abhorrent, but you can get out of indentured servitude. You can't get out of slavery. There's nothing you can do about it.
of international solidarity. But these donations weren't enough to stop the ruthless exploitation by British landlords. Even when enough food was being imported, it wasn't getting to the Irish people.
Get out of indentured servitude? Dude, are you really going to fucking try to make a comparison that indentured servitude was just as bad as chattel slavery? Please, go ahead. Make that argument, dude. Please explain it to me. I mean, I recognize how fucking disgusting it is. But, like, if you unironically think that, like, your children are automatically slaves, okay, like, automatically slaves because of the color of your skin and are being bought and sold in a marketplace, you're out of your fucking mind. And also, Irish people don't agree with you, for the record, okay? It's just monstrous.
And death continued. Impoverished Irish, with barely enough to eat, were evicted from their homes. One priest remembers the scene of a mass eviction. 700 human beings were driven from their homes in one day and sent adrift on the world to gratify the caprice of one who, before God and man, probably deserved less consideration than the last and the least of them. The horrid scenes I had then witnessed, I must remember all my life long. The wailing of women, the screams, the terror, the consternation of children, the speechless agony of honest, industrious men, wrung tears of grief from all who saw them. By the time the famine began to end in the early 1850s, about 20% of the Irish population, 2 million human beings, had died of disease or hunger. Another 2 million had left for brighter shores. Today, Ireland's population is still lower than it was in the 1840s. But Ireland has never forgotten the famine and the generosity that some showed to them. During COVID, when the people of the
Shout out to Sultan Optimism for sending us money to eat when he was a real one, unlike these British scum.
Navajo Nation were hit hard, Ireland.
You're an absolute lib-brained fucking weirdo for comparing two instances of evil. What the fuck is the point? To minimize what happened elsewhere? There is no point. It's weird and disgusting. It's disgusting to compare it. Dude, it is literally a historical fact. I already mentioned that, like, oppression Olympics or comparisons between, like, genocidal famine being forced upon motherfucker John Cena CCP, dude. Dude, shut the fuck up, dude. Shut up. Just shut your stupid fucking mouth. Seriously. It's not that I jumped to compare it. I compared it because there were chatters who were comparing it. Okay? And I described, not a comparison, but an objective fucking fact. Yet you did the comparison anyway? Yes, that comparison also revolved around an objective fucking fact. Go ahead. If I don't stop someone spreading misinformation like that, then you end up with minimizing the impact of chattel slavery. Simon Chatter, so horny to dunk on you. My mother's maiden name belongs to the man whom a relative of mine was indentured to, still wouldn't compare to chattel slavery. This argument always brings out the chatters who never had the soft spot on their skull closed and their fontanelle pulses faster and faster until they can type about it. Every time a chatter makes a comparison and you try to explain, they say you are comparing impressions. Yeah. The nuance is that you can't always get out of indentured servitude. Some of the Caribbean were caught in indenturedness for generations, and Brits would often call chattel slavery indentured servitude, with slavery was not as fashionable. Chattel slavery is worse, of course, but not all indenturedness is created equal. Irish people not comparing their struggles to black people, impossible difficulty. I don't even think, like, actually Irish people fucking do that, for the record. I think the people that do that are LARPers who are like 11 generations American Irish who are like Joe Biden. You know what I mean? Brandon's not fucking Irish, but he claims he is. You know what I mean? Like, kiss me, I'm Irish, Jack. BBC, I'm Irish type Americans. It's so fucking stupid, dude. It is like brain dead, idiotic white Americans who want a fucking crumb so desperately of like the same kind of systemic oppressions that they live through to this day, when no such systemic oppression or cultural signifier in the United States of America especially exists. If you're an Irish person living in Ireland, you went through the Troubles and you are still subjugated to some of the neo-colonial imperialist interests of the kingdom, then it's a little bit different. But again, those people don't even do that. Those people aren't comparing themselves to black people and saying, oh, ours is actually the same. Okay? The only people that fucking do that are literally American Irish dumbasses who are not even Irish. You're just American. It's the most American white guy thing to do. Okay? Crying about your personal oppression and trying to compare it in a country where, you know, that went away. 8% of me is getting really worked up when hearing you talk about my Irish peoples this way. Google Boondock Saints. Yeah. That's crazy, man. The fuck's wrong with you? You Americans literally just have like straight up the worst kind of brain disease. You're the one minimizing literally right now because you feel the need to compare every human atrocity to chattel slavery. No one said that Irish oppression was comparable to chattel slavery besides the useless baiters in the chat that you replied to. You're the one No, I'm not minimizing it. I'm not minimizing it. I am addressing a chatter who compared it, but you're incredibly fucking butthurt because, again, you are not actually an Irish person. You are multiple generations removed and LARPing as an Irish person in the United States of America, and you desperately want to fucking feel a crumb, just a crumb of brownie points. That's precisely what it is. You fucking fragile bitch. I can't, and ironically, I think you're doing it because you want to defend America too. This is Joe Biden's all these Irish posting right now. Yeah, BBC, I'm Irish. And by the way, this person isn't a fucking tanky, you dummies. This is literally one of those dudes who's just like, absolutely like sock them adjacent guy who fucking probably complains about tankies nonstop.
9 months of brain gunk.
I don't know, actually. He doesn't seem like it. Maybe he's not. But he is absolutely fucking losing his shit in the chat, saying I'm minimizing it. How the fuck did this conversation turn into, like, me, obviously, always in support of Irish people and their struggles, into me minimizing it? Dumbass. Best argument I've ever heard on how grossly different the Irish and black oppression is that Irish people are able to blend into American society in 2 generations. Yeah. You are correct. Johnson SCP. Remember this when the tankies are defending Russian imperialism because NATO is bad. You can't spell MLs without L's. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's like a fucking LARPer liberal sock them who thinks like they have somewhat like relative radical politics, even though they unironically listen to Marxist-Leninists, mention them in the chat, and say that they have brilliant analysis without realizing that, like, those very same people who they say have brilliant analysis, like Noah, would fucking laugh at their idiotic point of view. Constantly fucking crying about fucking tankies. Conversation happened because you replied to fake takes from baiters. No one thinks Irish oppression is comparable to chattel slavery. Oh, now you're... Oh, okay. Goalpost. Got it. The goalpost moved from I'm minimizing it personally to, oh, it was a fake take. Got it. That's cool. It was actually not real. Okay.
He's only minimizing the bitches he gets.
Yeah.
Repaid their kindness shown to them during the famine by raising $2 million. And Ireland has never forgotten those who did not help them, the British government, and all those who valued profits over humanity. As the British historian A.J.P. Taylor would later write, the English governing class had the blood of 2 million Irish people on their hands. All Ireland was at that.
Also, the
10%
chatters
of the
never
chat
met
is
like
kinda right,
American
though.
Irish
The way
people
you compare
who
the two struggles is pretty fucked up.
constantly
It's just like
fucking
the way
make
you
that
compare the way
comparison,
we have to struggle with
being
top of
the
hour and
right-wing
breaks at the
shitheads
top
they
of the hour
are,
every hour.
okay? Constantly comparing it to be like, oh, why don't we have rights? We were enslaved as well, you fucking piece of shit. It's like, dude, you're literally white, okay? You're like multiple generations removed. You don't have that kind of like a systemic consequence now. You're a fucking dickhead, okay? It's ridiculous.